Portland State University professor and political analyst Jack Miller is here to talk about the big races and issues from this week's primary. Jack Miller is a senior instructor of political science at PSU, and he helped anchor our election coverage on Tuesday night. Professor Miller, welcome to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Good to be here.
Yeah, first of all, the governor's race. Talk about the significance of this lineup of three women.
You know, Oregon politics has actually been a really good landscape for female elected officials for a while, and I think that we can be justifiably proud of that. We have, if not the highest percentage of women in our state legislature, one of the highest in the nation. I do think it actually is the highest. Multnomah County, Metro Council, Portland City Council. We have a female governor incumbent. We've had past governors. So in general, Oregon politics is a place where female candidates face, I would say, fewer obstacles and less bias than in other places, and that's a good thing, and that's reflected by the fact that we have three strong female candidates running for governor in a really important race right now.
Much has been made of the Betsy Johnson effect, the so-called Betsy Johnson effect. Betsy Johnson, a former Democrat state senator, running as an unaffiliated candidate. What's your take on her candidacy and how it will affect the overall race?
You know, third-party candidates tend to be spoilers. She does have a realistic shot at it because we do have a large percentage of the Oregon electorate are unregistered, unaffiliated. We have a little over a third Democrat, a little bit less than that Republican, and roughly a third independent. So she's not necessarily just the classic spoiler, but one of the things about spoilers is they often tend to spoil in one direction or the other. There's a former Democrat that takes a lot of votes from the Democratic candidate, or a former Republican. Betsy Johnson is a former Democrat, but she is, I would say, on the conservative side of that line. And so I can see her taking votes from both Kotek and Drazen. And so that's going to make it even more interesting as the three candidates really are battling, I would say, all of them at an even level for those votes. And it could go any way as far as I can tell at this point.
This could be the most expensive governor's race in Oregon history, especially since Johnson has the backing of Nike's Phil Knight. How much influence will money have on this race?
You know, money is a big part of politics no matter what. And, we actually in America, we spend billions of dollars a year on bottled water. And so I always say, well, we ought to be able to spend billions of dollars on our democratic process as long as there's parity and access to that kind of fundraising. I think all three of these candidates have a pretty good fundraising pipeline. Betsy Johnson definitely has, the being backed by a single wealthy person always gives you a boost. What this means, though, for us voters is we're going to see an awful lot of campaign ads, and all three candidates are going to be very much in the public eye. And in my view, since all three of them are going to have pretty good access to our eyeballs, that's really good for democracy. We're going to have a really good race for all three of them, showing us what kind of leader they would be going forward. And voters will have a lot of opportunity to soak in the messages they're getting from all three.
Yeah, my bosses at Coin TV will be happy about all that campaign money that will be spent leading up to that election.
Absolutely.
Probably the biggest possible upset in the primary, Jamie McLeod-Skinner, ahead of incumbent Congressman Kurt Schrader in the 5th Congressional District right now. That district was redrawn before the election. How much did that help the more progressive McLeod-Skinner or hurt the more moderate Schrader?
Jamie McLeod-Skinner ran in Oregon's 2nd district, which is the big district to the east. That's a safe Republican district. She ran there in 2018 and got 40% of the vote, which was not nearly enough to unseat incumbent Greg Walden, but it was the highest vote total a Democrat had gotten in that district in at least 20 years. She gave Greg Walden the best run that he had ever seen. So she can speak to rural voters. District 5 got moved from kind of coastal, Salem to the west of the coast, to sort of Salem to the east and into that big rural area. So Jamie McLeod-Skinner has experience speaking effectively to more rural voters. We don't normally think of progressive candidates and rural voters as aligning, but she is one of those people. The district, as it moved east, also moved into territory that has, I would say, a pretty strong base of union activism. And she did receive the endorsements of Democratic Party leadership in Clackamas County and in other counties in that district. And that helped as well because those Democratic Party organizations they do lean in that progressive direction. So I don't necessarily think that the demographics of the district favor her, but I think the activism and her ability to speak to the kinds of voters that are there makes her a serious challenger to an incumbent who otherwise, even though the district did change, the demographics are roughly the same. So he's not facing a radically different kind of electorate than he has in the past.
And whoever takes the Democratic nomination will run against former Happy Valley Mayor Lori Chavez DeRemer. Part of the 5th Congressional District is in Clackamas County. They're still hand counting votes because of the issues with the barcodes on the ballots. How serious is this, and what does this mean, in your opinion, in terms of voter confidence in the result?
Well, it's unfortunately because of efforts to question our election integrity, every election is now going to be scrutinized down to the last dot and crossing of T. This is not a normal thing to have a huge amount of ballots have smudged barcodes, which requires this sort of extra effort. But there's a lot of transparency, and as far as I can tell, things are going the way they're supposed to go. It's just that now there's a higher level of panic in the American political discourse about election integrity. I don't think that either candidate really has to worry that something is going to go sideways and it's going to cost them the election in a way that is unfair. But there's a heightened sensitivity to anything that falls outside of the irregular. And I think it's right for both campaigns to keep their eye on what's going on, to have their election observers there to just be part of that normal process of transparency.
We've got about a minute left, Professor, and I want to get to the Portland City Council Position 3 race. It's probably going to a runoff in November. Joanne Hardesty trying to keep her seat against either Renee Gonzalez or Vadim Madursky. How vulnerable is Hardesty?
For an incumbent to only get 39% of the vote is automatically, you would think that makes the Hardesty campaign nervous because the people who voted against her were well over half. What's different about the general election is there will only be 2 candidates, and she will be pitted against one other specific person. We don't yet know who it is, but we will know relatively soon. And so her campaign will be able to draw a sharp contrast between herself and that other candidate, as opposed to her being, I would say, the alternatives to her on May 17th were, do we want the incumbent or do we want somebody else? And so I would say it's an uphill battle when you only get 39% in the primary, but the race in November will be very different because it will be one-on-one. And I think it may be close, but I wouldn't say she's out just because she only got 39% in the primary.
Professor Miller, thank you for being here on Eye on Northwest Politics.
Always happy to show up, Ken.